Okay, I think I'm gonna get started. Thanks everybody for coming today for the CS Distinguished Lecture, as well as a joint seminar between the ORAI program and the Center for AI in Society. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Professor Carla Gomes from Cornell. I had the luck to actually be her PhD student maybe 15 years ago, and I'm so excited to have her today come and share with us some of her research. Carla is a force of nature and a visionary. She helped establish the field of computational sustainability, essentially really realizing the need for computer scientists to take charge and actively participate in trying to address some of the great challenges of sustainable development. At Cornell, she most recently also co-directs the AI for Science Institute. She has led 2 NSF Expeditions in Computing Awards, both to establish and grow the field of computational sustainability. Her work spans large-scale constraint reasoning, optimization, and machine learning, and she has many publications, I think more than 200 publications, and has been recognized by major awards such as the 2021 AAAI Feigenbaum Award and the 2022 ACM and AAAI Allen Newell Award. So without further ado, I'm really looking forward to hear about the latest advancements that Carla will share with us. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, first, Bis and Phoebe, for inviting me, and Bistra for this kind introduction. Yes, Bistra was one of my first students, very special. In fact, recently we invited her and she gave a talk at Cornell, and it's just amazing. So it's such a privilege also to be here. Thank you so much. And I'm going to set my timer now. So I will be talking about knowledge-centric AI for scientific discovery. And as Bistra mentioned, I will be, my research has been driven by computation sustainability, which, as she mentioned, it's really a new field that aims to harness the power of AI and computational methods to address a challenge in sustainability and sustainable development. Often when people talk about sustainability, they think about just maybe environment, but sustainable development, when back in '87, when the actually Gro Brundtland proposed, the key idea was to emphasize that sustainable development encompasses balancing environmental, economic, and societal goals. And more recently, they proposed the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So you can see it really covers a range of goals. The ultimate goal of sustainability is really development, of sustainable development. It is human well-being and of current and future generations. And you see the set of goals going from, no poverty, no hunger, education, health, women, well-being, economic infrastructure to, climate action, to life on land and water, etc. So very, very ambitious agenda. And, as Bistra mentioned, this was only possible thanks to the support of NSF. In fact, she was there when we had the first expedition and applied for the second. So the first one allowed us to really establish the field, and we created the Institute for Computational Sustainability. And it allowed us to actually, identify the core areas in terms of CS and in terms of sustainability. And that we actually were they changed the program and allowed us to go for the second expedition, where we still had to come up with a big vision. Implicitly we were focusing more the second one more on actually AI for science for sustainability, and so this has been very exciting. And I wonder if you can see Bistra there. She's right there with the red very nice scholars. And so, of course, I'm very thankful to NSF, but to all my collaborators, correct? This has been a huge network, and students and faculty. And, you know, more recently, we have established this Cornell University AI for Science Institute that has been really possible also with, you know, the funding from Schmidt Science. This is an ambitious program with 100 postdocs over 6 years. And you see covering different areas: AI for science, materials discovery, sustainability science, biological science, and again, very, very broad, and physics. And we also, part of our research is also funded by an institute with focus more on agriculture and forestry, an NSF institute. And I thought I would mention, you have an NSF NRT. We also have an NRT, again, AI for Sustainability initiative. So the problems I will be talking about reflect to some extent, you know, these connections and these areas that we've pursuing. But as I said, you know, the most important collaborators are really the students. And again, there's Bistra, very colorful always. And I'm very thankful because, you know, we established, you know, very profound relationships with our students and collaborations. And they are really, you know, the bees energizing and with really tremendous contributions. So let me now talk about AI. I don't think I need to say much about the progress in terms of AI. AI has really demonstrated superhuman capabilities. And here I have tasks that we perceive as intellectual tasks, you know, like chess or Go. But obviously, now what we see is there's a shift. The AI is moving from the academic world to the real world, correct? For example, of course, you know, our smart iPhone has all kinds of AI apps, Wall Street, self-driving cars, and of course, ChatGPT. So things are changing dramatically, and what we see is the models are, you know, becoming larger and larger with lots of parameters. This is already outdated. We are even talking about artificial general intelligence, correct? So we see this emergent behavior as the models, the size of the models increase, we have, you know, new capabilities. So my view is that the next frontier for AI is scientific discovery and decision making. So I will give you some examples of the kinds of problems that I'm interested in the context of sustainability. For example, AI to combat the rapid decline in biodiversity, work that I will be talking about, such as joint species distributions. And, you know, we actually, with BISA, we worked a lot on wildlife corridors. AI to accelerate materials discovery for renewable energy, for example, for solar fuels. And another example is AI for strategic planning to reduce the adverse impacts of the Amazon basin hydropower expansion on people and nature. When we think of dams, we think of hydropower energy as clean energy. However, you know, dams can have other impacts, actually very negative impacts in terms of river connectivity affecting sediments and nutrient transport. It can really affect fish migrations and fish biodiversity, deforestation, flooded farmland, and even you think as hydropower energy is clean, but it can actually be dirtier than coal because dams can flood huge areas that lead to the decomposition of organic matter with the release of methane. So it is important to think, when we think about decision-making systems, to consider, systems that can understand trade-offs and understand multi-objectives, which takes us to, typically systems are designed with a single objective. Well, we need to think about multiple objectives. So that takes me to this perspective that we should focus on knowledge-centric AI, moving from, pure data-driven to more knowledge-centric. Again, over the last decade, we've seen tremendous progress, and this progress has been highly data-driven, data-centric AI. And my perspective is that pure data-centric approaches have inherent limitations for scientific discovery and decision-making. We are interested in going beyond general intelligence, and we are interested in scientific artificial intelligence. So I propose a knowledge-centric approach where basically we inject knowledge-centric reasoning into data-driven AI. So because we need systems that can reason from first principles, with obviously taking advantage of the all data we have, correct? But just relying on data-centric approaches is not really enough, because we need our models to generalize beyond the training data. They need to be interpretable. For scientific applications, we actually need generative AI and for decision making, and we also need to deal with large scale combinatorial search space, often that really are very challenged. And as I mentioned, for the case, the real case of the strategic planning of hydropower dams, clearly we need to go beyond single objective and reason in higher dimensions and in terms of multi-objective. That is the kind of problems we are dealing with. Really, data-centric approaches are not good enough, and we need to really inject this knowledge-centric reasoning. So I will talk about several examples, and one key message is that it is important to incorporate, scientific knowledge into our frameworks. And basically what I want to emphasize is actually the synergies that you can obtain by, for example, I'll talk about how work that we develop for joint species distributions, for bird distributions, actually provided really key insights to tackle problems in materials discovery, material science, how that led to frameworks for other predictive tasks, for example, for predicting properties of materials or soil organic carbon cycle, but also even unsupervised tasks for example, in materials discovery and molecular understanding organic and inorganic molecular structures. So here is the outline of my talk. I will, from a CS AI point of view, I will talk about multi-labeled and multi-target regression learning. This is motivated by joint species distributions. Then I'll talk about deep reasoning nets for unsupervised or weakly supervised pattern demixing. This was motivated by this problem in a problem I'll talk about in materials discovery. And the final chapter will be about decision making, in particular the Pareto optimization for the Amazon River, and the Amazon basin, and if time permits, I'll talk a little bit about the 30 by 30 problem. So let's start with this multi-entity learning. Again, this was motivated by joint species distributions. And, as you know, one of key challenge that we face with is, the reduction of biodiversity. And the fundamental question in biodiversity research is understanding how species are distributed across landscapes over time. And to do that, we can, collect lots of data from all kinds of sensors, including a very special sensor that's missing here. Can you guess the sensor I'm thinking of? Exactly. We are still the best sensors in the world. And so Cornell has this fabulous program that's called eBird, that anybody is actually encouraged to submit bird observations. It's a citizen science program. We have over 1 million volunteer birds that have contributed with over 1 billion bird observations, which is the work more than building the Empire State Building 5 times. And combining this with data collected from other sensors, like concerning land cover, weather, remote sensing, and using these spatial temporal and deep reasoning models, we can now generate this machine, what you see here is actually the output of a deep learning model. And these models actually now reveal the habitat preference and migrations of birds at a very fine resolution. So, and with this information, we can now actually inform, for example, the State of the Birds report that is produced by the Secretary of Interior. So these models are very important for conservation, because then knowing the migrations, we can target conservation initiatives. And as an example, this is a program by the Nature Conservancy that is called Bird Returns, and the goal of this program is to protect migratory waterbirds in California against the drought. So here what you see is the Sacramento Valley in California, and our models show the path, the migration of the birds. And so that with that information, the Nature Conservancy has this program that uses combinatorial reverse auctions, letting the farmers submit bids to keep water in the rice fields that are along the path of the bird. So this is a very novel way of doing conservation. Of course, it's only possible, and they've generated a ton of habitat because of these very accurate models. So from a computation point of view, traditionally, ecologists actually have this distribution, these models where they do one species at a time. But they actually know that it is important to do joint prediction of the distributions, because there are species dependence in terms of competition and cooperation. So it is important for ecologists to know the preference of the species with respect to the environment, but also the interactions among species. And to model this is actually not trivial. And in fact, that is governed by a multivariate Gaussian model, but the current state of the art of the models, on the ecologist side, the features are manually engineered. And both on the computer science side and models used by ecologists, it is very difficult to train this multivariate Gaussian model, because, it is very difficult to estimate the covariance matrix. So how to go about this? But, for ecologists, that was the thing they were interested in. have good predictions, but also understand the interactions of species. And, this is, for the students here, this is something that I always advocated, that when we work on problems, we need to be loyal to the application. We are not just going to make assumptions like VAEs, always assume a diagonal matrix, which means independence. We really needed to address their main concern is understanding the interactions of species. So we needed to be able to estimate the covariance matrix for this model. I'm not going to go into details, but basically we needed to take advantage of the machinery of deep learning, but still being able to be realistic and capture these interactions, and in particular compute the covariance matrix. So of course, at a broader picture is we are interested in developing models that are interpretable, more interpretable than the traditional models. And as you know, these models tend to be black boxes. The deep learning and transformers are very complex nonlinear functions, and they have lots of parameters. They are black boxes, and depending on lots of data, often, label data or not, but, they are really not interpretable. Here, we don't really know how many the parameters of the current models, but a very large number of parameters. And, when it comes to scientific models, it is important to be able to interpret the models and satisfy scientific principles. So our approach is to actually open up these models and have interpretable layers that we can then apply, reasoning and knowledge to interpret and condition these models. And you will see I have this bow tie kind of thing that is going to be, a common general architecture that is applied across a variety of domains. And the first one is indeed these joint species distributions, where, this is a model where we get, an encoder. The input is satellite images and landscape features, etc. So we use the image in like 72 or more features, and this is a supervised model, because we get the labels from citizens that submit the observations, and what we want to do is to have as an output, this deep multivariate probit model, which is essentially a multivariate Gaussian model, but we want to be able to compute the parameters for the model, the mu's and the sigma, and that was the big challenge. So we created this structured latent space, and here we have the latent space where we capture, the mu's and the information to compute. Oh, I thought it would be soft. And the information to compute the covariance matrix. I will not get into details. Feel free to ask me offline. But the trick here is to actually decompose the variable into two parts, one a residual variable and another variable, the independent variables. And so once we condition this, we can compute the expectation condition on this residual value, and therefore we can use GPUs. And we also assume, and this is a parameter that we learn, that not, for example, we apply this 500 species, it's not they all interact with each other. So it's a low rank covariance matrix. And as a result, you see here, this is what you see here is the output of the model, and in this case for 41 species of warblers, and you see the species arrive in about March in the US, and then they go north, and then they come down. And this model really outperforms existing models, and it does provide a lot of information concerning the interactions with species. So here you see this is the projection of the latent space, the habitat interactions, and so the preference with respect to the habitat and the species. And you see here that actually our colleagues produced these beautiful dendrograms, and they analyze the interactions of species and the preference of the species. This is actually a very general model, and in fact another rule that I have, when we develop a framework, we have to make sure that it's general enough. And for example, this was also applied for multi-object detection for computer vision, where you want to provide labels for multiple labels for images. Here in the bird's case, you wanted to predict all the species that you can see at a given time at a given location. Here it is multi-object detection, but we apply to also the Amazon land cover, fish distributions, material science, so many other domains, and including, initially this model was designed for presence-absence. We generalize it for abundance. So not only do we want to know if a species is present or all the species present at a given location, we want to know how many. And once we did that, we could apply that to fisheries. Actually, I don't know if I have here. We actually apply that to fisheries, but we then also apply to predicting properties of materials. So this is now a regression problem. So, and another case where we apply this is actually for soil organic carbon cycle. And again, here is the bow tie example, visualization, where we have this interpretable latent space with an encoder. In this case, the decoder is this multivariate probit model, and here the reasoning module is this shared low rank covariance matrix. Again, we apply this to other cases, and here, this is what I show here. Actually, this was just accepted at AAAI. This is a model that is for predicting and understanding soil organic carbon cycle. And again, we have an encoder, an interpretable latent space where we capture the parameters of the model, and the decoder is actually a physics-based model, with the differentiable physics-based model, a mechanistic model with differential equations. That is actually a climate model that's used by the climate community. But you see the structure is very similar to the other one, but the modules changed. Here we have a differentiable decoder. Let me now go to my next topic, that is solving a key problem in material science, that is what it's called crystal structure phase mapping. This is a core long-standing problem in material science, and the goal is to infer the structure of crystals from X-rays. So I'm given a collection of X-rays, and I want to infer the structure of the materials. To give you a very quick idea how this is done, material science do this co-sputtering, which is like similar to atomic spray painting. Here you see a wafer, and there are 3 guns with 3 metals, so they can synthesize, and often so they do this sputtering and then some kind of annealing, to bake the material. So they can synthesize lots of materials, and they can then characterize them using X-ray. Actually, this is a student that overlapped with Bistra, Ronan collecting data from the synchrotron. So, it's easy to synthesize the materials, characterize them with high-intensity X-rays. The key problem is how to infer the structure, the crystal structure of the materials based on X-ray diffraction patterns. This is a little similar to what Watson and Crick did when they wanted to know the structure of DNA using X-rays. Here we want to know the structure of the materials using X-rays, and it's a little more complicated than the DNA. I mean, DNA was in itself very challenged because the structures can get mixed. So we need to demix them. So you see the problem defined here. We represent now the system. In this case, it contains 3 elements: aluminum, ferro, iron, and silicon. And you see several X-rays are sampled. And then what you want to know, you can think of this problem almost as a clustering problem. You want to identify, the different regions in this ternary system corresponding to different crystal phases. For example, this is alpha, this is beta, this is alpha, then beta. But, this is like a clustering problem. However, the little clusters have to obey rules, physics. They have to be connected. If you have 3 elements, you cannot explain with more than 3 crystal structures. So there are what we call thermodynamic rules that the systems have to obey. And also there's this shifting of the X-rays, but essentially we want to identify alpha, beta, the mixture, and then for each region I want to show the crystal structure that characterizes that region. So this is a very interesting problem and very challenging. Here you see an example of, here is a mixed phase, and I want to demix to show the components alpha and beta. And this is completely unsupervised, but I do know, some structures that have been observed in other systems for the crystals, and I know these thermodynamic rules. So how do I solve this problem? It's unsupervised, as I said. There's a lot of noise. And the standard, in fact, the reason why I was attracted to this problem was the standard ML would not work. So I liked working on problems where I knew that ML would not work for a while. And it still doesn't, standard ML techniques don't work here. Because, the standard ML techniques fail to capture the underlying physics of the problems. And, they can do some, we can do some clustering or matrix factorization or whatever, but at the end, we need to make sure the system obeys the rules of physics, correct? So that doesn't work. Therefore, our idea was to really combine and using some kind of more knowledge-centric AI and inject that into deep learning. So that is really the big picture of this work. But before I talked about that, I'm going to talk about a very different problem, and I'm going to ask you if you can make sense of this. Do you know what this is? Or would you guess? I mean, wow. How did you guess that? That, I mean, maybe you saw Sudoku before, but that's not good enough. Tell me, what's there? I mean, what's this? 6 and 4. What about this? So it's not easy, correct? Okay. And indeed, I'm going to tell you some prior knowledge that indeed you guessed right. These are 2 overlapping Sudokus. One using maybe one using digits from 1 to 9, and I assume everybody knows the rules of Sudoku, but essentially you cannot repeat a digit in a row, column, and block. And one using digits from 1 to 9 and another one from A to I. Therefore, this cannot be a 6 and a 4 because they come, one is on letters. So you have more prior knowledge now, correct? And in fact, it cannot be a 6 and a 4 because one is a letter, another one is a digit. So, and there you could think there are two A's, but yeah, we cannot have two A's in the same row. So basically, we actually developed, this framework, which was honestly super inspired by the bird think, where we realize we need to have an interpretable latent space where we can apply the Sudoku rules. And in fact, indeed, you see here we have exactly this interpretable latent space, and this deep reasoning nets can solve and demix the Sudokus by using data learning techniques, but at the same time reasoning about Sudoku rules. And we have an encoder that actually it is a graph neural net that produces this interpretable latent space, and a decoder in this case is once you guess the digit, then there's a SIGAN that generates the digit, and then you want to reconstruct the images. And this works better than this is unsupervised, but it works actually better than supervised techniques when they don't have the Sudoku rules. But the real problem that we wanted to, in fact, I'm going to tell you a secret. This was a made-up application because this was really the crystal structure phase mapping. That was our key question. But because, and Vishra probably remembers, we always, when we solve a problem, then we need to show that this is general. So I made up the Sudoku example so that it could be submitted to a computer science conference, because they would, computer science, when they see science, they immediately go or whatever. So that was just an example to make it easy to explain. But this is the example we are really interested in. And here you see it's a real system. It's this bismuth copper vanadium oxide system. The humans, experts, could not decipher this system. And each little thing is like a cell of the Sudoku. And this is an X-ray that may contain one crystal structure, 2 or 3, but we don't know. And what we know, this is the prior knowledge, other crystal structures or crystal structures that have been discovered for other systems involving the same elements, not this system. It's like we know what the digits and letters look like. And we have then the rules that govern these systems that are like the Sudoku rules. And by using this, we were able to identify the 13 crystal structures. It's like 13 digits. This system is written with 13 crystal structures. And we were actually able to identify what it's called the phase map. It's like the Sudoku grid. And then you see these are all the different regions explained by 1 or 2 or 3 crystal structures. But we don't know, like in the Sudoku, we knew a priori that there were 2 overlapping things. Here we didn't. So, and that was quite exciting, and our collaborators performed additional experiments and identified that this region is actually a new, very exciting solar fuel material. And again, you see the structure is very similar to the Sudoku and even to the birds. And here I actually put the the latent space aligned and the input-output. Here, what you see, we use an encoder that actually is a multi-layer perceptron. Now, again, the latent space is interpretable, where for the digits we are basically reasoning about the probabilities of the digits and the shapes of the digits for the Sudoku. This is going to feed this conditional GAN to reconstruct the image. Here we have, you know, what it's called stick patterns, where there's this library, ICSD inorganic crystal structure database with known patterns that we can use as prior knowledge. But then, you know, there's something very special that if this is a challenge. When you do science, you need to learn science. And there's this Bragg's law that tells you how the light diffracts once it hits the crystal. So we can use this Bragg's law as part of the decoder combined with the GMM. So you see, again, the decoder is obviously customized for this, but essentially you see this common structure. And I'm just here recapping this. And in this case, you know, the latent space, actually, we even improved the model. We actually now keep track of the latent space is keeping track of the 6 parameters that define the crystal, so that we can, for example, impose symmetry breaking, etc. And the reasoning module is the thermodynamic rules that the system has to obey. And the decoder is a differentiable Bragg's law reasoning module combined with GMM. And essentially, you know, in this case, this is almost like an autoencoder. We have the input, it's the X-ray diffraction pattern. We reason about it, and we have the Bragg's law saying, if you have this crystal structure, the X-ray diffraction pattern should look like this. So we can, you know, generate it. And that's how we solve. And honestly, we were struggling because we were trying to solve this system actually for a long time using matrix factorization, but we were not combining the reasoning about the factorization of the crystal structures with reasoning about the rules. Here we combine everything, and that's why we really improve performance. And in particular, we can use like this Bragg's law to generate this is, you know, this is like an inverse problem. You are given the X-ray, guess the structure. So this is like a forward model, okay? Let me speed up. I will not talk much about it, but this is a very exciting work here. It is another inverse task using mass spectrometry. If you don't know, you can ask me later. But basically, given a compound, I want to infer the formula of this compound based on measurements. And again, we use an encoder, an interpretable latent space guesses the formula, and the forward model is going to, you know, it is a combinatorial probabilistic model that generates the isotopes for that particular formula. You know, again, I just want to show you that it's very similar structure, but here we use these, again, well-established chemistry laws and this differentiable forward model as a decoder. And but essentially, I want you to see they are very similar structures. The bigger picture here is to go towards knowledge-centric multi-agent frameworks. Here you see Sarah. We actually have Sarah partially implemented, a robot scientist that, you know, formulates hypotheses, can plan experiments, execute experiments, and interpret the experiments. In fact, here you see Sarah using laser spike annealing to zap the materials. It can go to 1400 degrees centigrade very quickly. Then we collect data, optical data and X-ray data, and Sarah is doing active learning, deciding where to collect the next, where to perform the next experiment and collect the data. And Sarah uses the deep reasoning net to also solve this problem. So, very large groups, I want to emphasize, again, this, I talked about demixing structures and demixing Sudokus, but there are other problems that are relevant. For example, elephant code detection from audio recordings, and I mentioned briefly the metabolite identification problem. So I have 7 minutes, so not too much, but I want to talk about my last topic, that is decision making. And here, this is multi-objective decision making or Pareto optimization. And again, I want to thank everybody. And typically, when you are involved in these problems, they are highly interdisciplinary. So what's the problem? About 200 dams have already been built or are under construction in the Amazon. They planned about 400 new dams. And as I already mentioned, dams produce energy, but they can have very negative impacts. So from a computation point of view and an AI point of view, we want more ethical AI systems that really are able to understand trade-offs and reason beyond a single dimension, to think about multi-objectives. And here is the notion of Pareto frontier, just with 2 objectives, where along the X you see idle power energy and the ecosystem value. If I don't build any dams, obviously I don't have any energy and I get all the ecological value. If I build lots of dams, I get a lot of energy, but I destroy I have very little ecological value. Here you have a solution in between, but there's another one that has the same output in terms of energy, but it's way worse in terms of ecological value, correct? So you want to, this is a dominated solution. You want to go for this one because for the same energy, you get much more ecological value. So here is an example of 2 configurations where this one has better connectivity because you place the dams further away. And so our approaches are really how can you compute the exact Pareto frontier. And the key point here is that, and we exploit problem structure because rivers are trees, and if you know in computer science, that's quite a unique structure. We can actually develop a fully polynomial time approximation scheme where using dynamic programming based approach. And I admit that I never thought I would use this in practice because this is quite theoretical, but indeed we use in practice this. And just very quickly to give you an idea how we do this, we represent the tree as a graph. And here are the locations that we want to, what is unique is the nodes actually correspond to areas that are not affected by dams, and the edges there correspond to the locations of the dam. So it's a little counterintuitive. But essentially, again, I'm just going very fast, but the key insight is that you can recursively compute this Pareto frontier, and you only need to keep Pareto optimal partial solutions. And you can do basically propagation and basically eliminate solutions recursively that are dominated. I'm not going to go again, you can ask me in detail, but because of this structure, the key part is actually how to do removal of the dominate solutions, and then we can actually use this FPTAS, the fully polynomial time approximation, and we have developed very fast algorithms to prove dominated solutions. And here you see this is the Pareto frontier if we had done this before any dam was built. This is the existing dam, so here we can show the foregone environmental benefits or the foregone power earnings. And this is the Pareto frontier moving forward, and we have done this also for greenhouse gas emissions, and here we actually show that if you are not careful, you can have solutions that are dirtier than coal. Here you have for other criteria, and now I'm going fast. Here we show that we can take advantage of the structure and also have floating solar PV, which moves the frontier to the right, so we get more power. And that is basically a visualization of the Pareto. Here you see, because we are considering several criteria, you see we have to actually represent them using these bars. But I admit an open question is really how to visualize and communicate the Pareto frontier to to policymakers. My final little topic is this the 30 by 30, where the goal is to protect 30% of land and water by 2030. Again, a big team. And the idea here is we focus in this, our work, we focus on freshwater fish. And you see, this is the richness in the world. You can see some regions are very rich, like South America, and here the south of the US, Africa, and Asia. Here is the protection so far, about 12% of the freshwater fish species, but the goal is really to protect and manage 30% of land, inland waters, and the coastal and marine areas by 2030. The key point here is that we want to, again, expect, oh, there's my sink. We want to expand the protected areas, maximizing the protection of freshwater fishes under 30%, correct? That's, we want to maximize the species protection. How do we tackle this? We actually propose a new variant of knapsack that we call the expansion of connected components from alternative terminals. There was another version in telecommunications, but not from alternative terminals. So we propose different formulations, and basically we show that these formulations, if we were dealing with a planar graph, actually the problem is quite hard to solve. And ironically, or counterintuitively, the more protected areas you have, the easier the problem gets. But another thing we showed, and look at this scale, 10 to the 4. These are synthetic instances and small. But if we were to deal with the trees, it would be like this takes 1 second versus 10 to the 4, correct? So the trees are much, much, much easier. And of course, the problem we are dealing with is really shaped like a tree. And in fact, we could solve this problem, which we were shocked. I actually met with the students, and I mentioned that we had like the happy ending story where we could solve it very quickly, so there's no paper, but then by analyzing the complexity, etc., we could show, we produced a paper that was just accepted last year at ICHCAI. But you see, we could solve this problem with 200,000 variables in 1 hour and 20 minutes. And that's shocking, and it has to do with the fact that the algorithm is exploiting the tree structure, correct? And so here we show you the global approach. What's the problem with this solution? I have 1 or 2 minutes. But what is the problem? You see, Brazil, the Amazon, South America would have to conserve a lot and the rest very little. So then we used a different approach per basin that's a little better. And you see here the contributions of the different countries. So a key challenge is how to distribute country level protection. So I'm about to wrap up, and basically, you know, another key message that I want to emphasize, that I think I already emphasized, is the transferability of approaches across domains. For example, I talked about large-scale spatial temporal modeling for birds that we also apply, for example, for materials properties. I talked about and also, you know, prediction tasks for solid organic carbon. Then I talked about demixing applying to Sudokus, to crystal structure phase mapping, to flight calls and metabolomics, and then the optimization for the Amazon and the 30 by 30. So to conclude, the way forward for science, I believe it is to develop these knowledge-centric approaches that inject, you know, knowledge-centric reasoning grounded in first principles with, you know, combine this with the flexibility of data-centric approaches. And another direction is really having this knowledge-centric multi-agent framework. I avoided agentic, but because, yes, maybe you will combine and make sense combine with LLMs, but the idea having this community of knowledge-centric agents that learn reasoning and collaborate. They also do this closed loop between inference and action, like Sarah, the scientific autonomous research agent that I talked about, with you know, the self-driving autonomous labs. And these agents should understand trade-offs. And you know, the vision is AI will become a valuable scientific collaborator. The bigger message that I often talk about is how this is a two-way street, because, you know, we inject computational thinking and insights to address sustainability and science questions, but we get back a lot because we develop new methodologies. We are exposed to new problems that lead to new methodologies. And this is it. I think I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla. Thank you for the wonderful talk. We have 1 or 2 minutes for questions. I encourage students to come to the mics. Anyway, audience,
or just
not
speak
only,
up.
Yeah, faculty and students, if you have
oh, there's one question there.
Yeah, just come up to the mic, please, so that people online can also hear you.
Oh, I see.
Thanks for the talk, Professor. I have 2 questions. One is I'm more interested in the implementation part, like especially how you incorporate the laws of physics, or like Bragg's law in the decoder part, and also how you incorporate that with the GMM to get the crystal structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very good question. So the key part is indeed for you to have an interpretable latent space, because once you have that, you can, for example, I'll talk about the Sudoku. That's very simple, correct? The rules are you cannot repeat a digit in a row, column, etc. So you have to implement those as constraints. And you are right, some of those constraints are combinatorial. And so we actually use relaxations of the constraints where we don't enforce the integrality of the digits. But so it is a bit of an art finding how to encode those constraints using differentiable constraints. And we do that, for example, using entropy-based functions. That's what we do. Or for the thermodynamic rules, again, we find different ways of encoding, and it is a bit of an art. The decoder is a Gaussian mixture model, so we often actually use decoders that are for example, the parameters, ideally, you also want to, Bragg's law is differentiable. You can implement that, and it is differentiable. So that's ideal for this setting. It depends, for example, for the Sudoku, we use as a decoder this CGAN that is actually fixed. So depending on the application for the soil organic carbon, we use this differentiable model that is actually a climate model, but it is all differentiable. So each application has different ways of implementing the constraints. For the Sudoku, that's another I was going to emphasize. Ideally, you would like to also incorporate your constraints in terms of the network. So for the Sudoku, we actually have as a reasoning module LSTM with constraint graphs to impose the constraints, so the model is going to generalize much better. So it really depends on the particular application, but ideally you need the interpretable latent space so that you have, and this is a very interesting question because you are guessing, let's say, the Sudoku digits, and you are going to have semantically saying, okay, this represents the probability of each digit, and if your model is not strong enough, even though you are calling the interpretable latent space that correspond to variables, it's not necessarily the case that the model is going to converge and give you the right answer. But if you have enough data, and if you have very good constraints to condition the model, then it works, like, for example, for the crystal structures or the Sudoku, etc. So so your question, I'm happy to talk to you more offline. What's your second question? And maybe that's the last question.
Yeah, let's take it offline because we have people online as well.
And
so
good class, probably.
Oh, yeah.
So let's just thank
you.
Yeah.
So maybe you can still ask your question, I guess.
Let's thank the speaker one more time. Thank you, Carla.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have a second question?
Yeah, so you used FPTA's mixed integer programming. You also mentioned the relaxation of the integrality. Like, why do you use these different methods for different questions? I guess you can also use FPTA's for a knapsack problem, for example. And
yeah,
like
very good.
How do you technique to solve each question?
Very good question.
And also, like, for the DEM question, sorry to interrupt, but like, why do we even need to approximate? Like, is it really exponential problem? Like,
yeah.
Like, do we have a lot of locations and like a lot of variables that you have to approximate?
That is very good question. Yeah, this, computing the Pareto frontier is truly exponential as the number of criteria increase.
Okay.
And trust me, this problem gets so, for example, one of our problems is because we have this FPTAS that is so good, we produce Pareto frontiers with millions of solutions. So the number of solutions really grows exponentially with the number of criteria. We tried MIP, and MIP, mixed integer programs, don't scale, take forever, and cannot provide really very good guarantees. We use an FPTAS because we are lucky, as you said, knapsack allows for approximations. You can think this as a knapsack with special constraints. And because we can use dynamic programming, that's why we use the FPTAs, and that's why we can scale the Pareto frontier so beautifully. And I mean, this application, I've never, I've never had a chance to use an FPTAs anywhere except here. So this is really exciting. Very good question.
Sorry, would you have time for another?
Yeah, I have time for, no, maybe do you have a question?